So for those of you who don't know, real quick, Tourism Vancouver Island is a nonprofit association. We have a industry-led board of directors. We operate across all of Vancouver Island, the Gulf Islands, Discovery Islands, and a small part of the Central Coast that overlaps with the Strathcona Regional District and the Regional District of Mount Waddington. We have a fairly diversified revenue model now, but our primary core funding comes from the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture. And we, of course, are really grateful for the partnership that we have with that ministry. As an organization, there's four key areas that we really pride ourselves on and focus on in a general sense. The first is destination leadership, and this idea that we have about a dozen tourism organizations across the Vancouver Island region. And we believe that as Tourism Vancouver Island, we have a responsibility to encourage each of these organizations to work collaboratively, to build trust among the organizations, and to find opportunities for us to work together on shared priorities. Along with that leadership priority also includes our industry advocacy work, which I'll be talking a bit more about shortly. Of course, marketing is still a really important part of what we do at Tourism Vancouver Island, although it's certainly looked different in the past year. Our approach is to be digital first in everything that we do and to try to inspire a responsible travel ethic. And I'll be talking a little bit more about how we've been trying to adapt to ensure that we meet the needs of the Public Health Office over the course of the last year, while also supporting industry as best we can. On the industry and destination development side of things, that's really focused on supporting the growth and development of Vancouver Island tourism businesses and experiences in a more general sense. And finally, we provide services to our partner communities and to businesses across the island. Those services are really focused on destination development, strategic planning with nonprofit associations and board governance work, and then also destination management, destination marketing at a community level. And I think like most of you on this call, whether you're from a nonprofit or a business, you went into this past calendar year with a solid business plan and a good sense of where you were going, and that was certainly the case for us until probably February or March, when we realized that our fabulous business plan was no longer relevant. And we realized that we would have to adapt in a really quick way in order to meet industry need and to be relevant as an organization. And I want to speak a little bit about that process of adaptation that we had as an organization and how we tried to support businesses with that. So in doing so, I'm going to start by briefly going over some of the impact that the COVID pandemic has had on tourism businesses across the region and provide you a brief glimpse at some of the research work that we've been doing. I don't want to get too bogged down in the details here. So if there is interest in taking a deeper dive into some of the research work that we've been doing, please feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to provide our full documents that around that. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the recovery initiatives that we've been focused on. And finally, I'll be touching on our kind of longer term efforts towards ensuring a sustainable and resilient industry here on the island. So obviously in early in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic quickly took hold and had a dramatic impact on travel around the world. We in BC have typically relied on sources of information from a kind of a tourism perspective that are a little bit out of date. Like Destination BC publishes really great regional reports looking at employment, number of businesses, et cetera. But those are really only updated every couple of years. And we knew that the impact of the pandemic would be quick and that it would change quite rapidly. With that in mind, we established 3 new research projects that help us to understand the real-time impact of the pandemic, create programs to help meet industry need, and advocate on behalf of industry to government. The first is a travel pattern study, which ultimately looks at overnight domestic visitation using cell phone tower data. Second is a business impact study. It was first weekly, then bi-weekly, and now monthly. And it is a random sample of tourism businesses from across the Vancouver Island region and now from across BC. And we look at the impact that the pandemic is having on employment and revenue and the overall health of businesses. And finally, on the marketing side, my colleagues have been focused on target market identification through market segmentation work that is leveraging our cell tower data that in part is coming through our travel pattern study. This is a really quick look at domestic overnight visitation over the course of the last year. You can see that in phase one, with Vancouver Island being the navy colored line, we observed a really steep and rapid drop off in domestic overnight visitation, dropping to about being down about 85% during the week of April 19th, compared to the same week the year prior. As phase two and phase three restrictions eased up and we were able to travel a little bit more freely within the province, we did see our numbers rebound. And British Columbia as a whole even saw a new record in terms of domestic overnight visitation across the province. One of the things that you'll notice is that Vancouver Island, compared to the rest of BC, has been struggling a little bit more, and we suspect that ferry and other transportation and access challenges were restricting travel to the island and encouraging folks to go elsewhere where you didn't have to be in a confined space. But we have been seeing that trend ease up a little bit more of late. This is a more recent snapshot looking from the start of January until mid-February, where we are still trending down. And compared to the same week last year, in mid-February, we were down almost 50% in terms of domestic overnight visitation. And the one thing I really want to stress here is that this is just for Canadian travelers who are staying overnight. So it doesn't account for lost visitation numbers that we, from other source markets being compromised, like the US and Australia, other key source markets around the world. So, if you were to look at just these graphs or these charts rather, it perhaps paints a slightly more optimistic or rosy view than reality. Our business impact study, I just took a quick jump into our most recent data that was collected during the month of January. What we found is that about 11.5% of businesses report that they're operating business as usual, 72% with reduced hours and services, and about 16.5% reported that they were either temporarily or permanently closed. We also found that on average, businesses had a reduced staff numbers by about 30% over the same time last year. 42% of businesses were unable to pay their January bills, and 8% of businesses have access to the BC Small and Medium Recovery Grant. And I think the most challenging stat that we found is that 75% of businesses are on average down 75% over the same period last year. So, the challenges are still very real, and a lack of certainty around what business will look like this summer, certainly adds to the concern that we have. So there's a little bit of a snapshot of where we're at from an impact perspective. And like I said, we continually publish this research that we've been working on a sometimes a weekly, sometimes a monthly basis, depending on the specific report. And encourage you all to take a look at those in our Tourism Vancouver Island newsletters. And I think what's been special about this new research work is that it enabled us to really design programs and design our overall response for trying to support businesses during this exceptionally difficult time. And we've had a few initiatives in particular that I just wanted to quickly highlight today. We've been, focused on these in our corporate communications over the past year. So I'm sure that many of you are aware of these initiatives, and for that reason, I don't want to spend a ton of time on any of them. So first of all is data-driven advocacy. The small and medium-sized recovery business program that I just mentioned, where something like only 8% of businesses have been able to access that, is one example where we're able to take that close to real-time data and then go to senior levels of provincial government and advocate for policy changes and program changes to better support the tourism industry. And we've had several wins over the course of the last year that I really believe have made a big difference to every tourism business owner in the Vancouver Island region. And what enables us to do this effectively is that we're working in partnership with our community DMOs, we're working in partnership with the other tourism regions across BC, and we're doing it in a way that is informed by timely and really accurate data. Second, the Tourism Resiliency Program. We launched that in the spring of last year. We worked with the Island Coastal Economic Trust to design this program from scratch and launch it in the course of just a couple of weeks. Today, we have several hundred businesses actively involved in the program where they have hands-on support and guidance in developing a plan to adapt to the new realities of the pandemic, prepare your business for to operate as best you can during these challenging times, and to ultimately be prepared to move forward in new and different ways when the pandemic comes to an end. Our team on the marketing side has been focused on responsible digital first marketing mediums that amplify public health messaging, whether they're recommendations or formal measures. And finally, we've been really involved in new infrastructure programs and want to speak a little bit more directly to some of the exciting announcements that have been taking place over the last couple of weeks with regards to that. Next, I just wanted to touch on kind of 6 key points that I think will really impact the next 6 months to year. First of all, our ability to open as an industry and to once again welcome guests is so dependent on the being able to secure and distribute our vaccine. And I think that it's becoming more and more clear that Canada is lagging behind, especially when you compare vaccination levels across Canada to our key source markets like the United States and most of Europe. We are far behind. And I think this current failure will have a impact on this summer in particular. And I encourage all businesses to closely monitor this, because I really believe it'll have a big impact on your ability to operate and the way in which you're able to operate. Second, another big factor that we're closely watching is COVID-19 mutations. My brother is a doctor in Newfoundland where one of his responsibilities is working in the COVID ward, and they have been seeing a shocking surge that's coming from the UK variant. I was talking to him a couple of days ago when he had 15 patients come through his emergency room, all in quick succession, all in very concerning states. And in Newfoundland, their studies have shown that the vast majority of COVID cases are that UK variant. And there's certainly concerns that that UK variant and others could become the dominant strain and would bring new and different challenges for us from a public health context and, of course, from a tourism operations context. Third, our ability to welcome guests will, I think, most significantly depend on our ability as British Columbians and Canadians to get our numbers summer with pretty solid travel between around British Columbia and being able to welcome Albertans. But the next couple of months will really impact what that looks like this summer. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, especially for businesses that rely on international travelers, is understanding which source markets will reopen and when. And there's a huge amount of there's not exactly clarity on this, but looking at vaccination uptake levels in key source markets, looking at overall COVID infection numbers in those source markets and more is going to be important to understand how you as business owners and we as destination management organizations direct our marketing efforts in a way that is targeting low-hanging fruit and people who will indeed be able to travel to the region. 5, we're closely monitoring resident sentiment, and I encourage all business owners to be engaged with their local communities and monitor how the community is feeling with regards to tourism and travel and the welcoming of guests, and really trying to be attuned to the needs of residents and communities is going to be so important as we try to maintain our social licenses and industry moving forward. And 6th, the other thing that we're really concerned about is the overall health of and survival of our tourism businesses across the Vancouver Island region. I think what makes us so special as a destination is the many thousands of small businesses that offer really compelling and authentic experiences. And our recovery as a island industry will heavily depend on the ability of these small businesses to survive until we reach more normal levels of visitation and are able to welcome our more traditional source markets once again. We're concerned about business consolidation and the loss of some of those small businesses. And a lot of our programming, the resiliency program in particular, is directly aimed at trying to ensure the survival of as many small and medium-sized businesses across the island as possible. And our advocacy work is also trying to push that same objective. Shifting gears a little bit for the last few minutes of my presentation, want to share some thoughts on the longer term resiliency of the tourism industry. We know that tourism will bounce back. When you look at 9/11 and SARS and other major challenges that the tourism industry on a global scale has faced, we've seen that tourism is indeed resilient, and that we can bounce back, and that we historically have bounced back stronger than we were before. And I'm confident that in the midterm that will be the case for us in Vancouver Island and BC and across Canada. But looking at that longer term window, I think that we as destination management professionals, as tourism business owners, educators, and students have a real responsibility to think a little bit bigger right now as well, and take this opportunity to try to prepare ourselves for the challenges that we'll face moving forward, and to ultimately try to ensure that the tourism industry is truly sustainable and equitable in the long term. And for me, that really hinges on three key pieces. And the BC Strategic Framework for Tourism touches on each of these in a way. First of all, it's all about people and communities. I think at the end of the day, all of us just want Vancouver Island communities to be great places to live, to do business, and to visit. And tourism plays a key role in that. When I got my start at Tourism Vancouver Island several years ago, a lot of what I was doing was providing value of tourism presentations to local government, Rotary clubs, and other groups. And at the time, there was a real lack of knowledge about the benefits that tourism brought to communities. I think that ship has sailed, and policymakers and local government and residents now know that tourism is a significant contributor to their communities. But there are also some real friction points that we need to work on in trying to find that balance between being able to welcome visitors and also ensuring that the needs and well-being of our residents will be met in the long term. Second is economic prosperity. We know that tourism is a significant driver of the island and BC's and Canada's economy. For the past several years, tourism growth had been outpacing GDP growth overall. We've been, really a shining light of an industry, and we will do that once again. And we need to ensure that our businesses will be prepared for the long term, and that there'll be, as minimal disruptions in our ability to do business as possible. And finally, the environment. We know that most British Columbian experiences are dependent on a healthy natural systems, and whether it's whale watching, other marine-based activities, land-based activities, or even the food and beverage industry. Vibrant natural systems are key to our long-term success and to our the destination as a whole, and being an attractive place for people to come and visit. So first of all, on the people and community side, some of the areas that we as Tourism Vancouver Island are focused on, from building a strong and diverse workforce. We are currently partnering with Indigenous Tourism BC on a labor market study. We are working with Spinal Cord Injury BC on a new program to try to help reduce barriers for people with disabilities to work in the tourism industry. And we have just partnered as of a couple of days ago with the Immigrant Services Society of British Columbia on a new initiative that will help to place new immigrants and refugees with meaningful training to help prepare them to enter the tourism workforce, and trying to come up with some creative ways to bridge the gap between these potential employees and potential employers. In terms of supporting communities, we are making investments in accessibility and want tourism to be inclusive. We also, are trying to advance reconciliation through tourism through our partnership with Indigenous Tourism BC and our partnerships with with specific Indigenous communities around the island. And I think I would encourage, whether you're a student on the call, an educator, or a business owner, to look at each one of these four pieces and think about how you as a business owner can try to advance some of these priorities, and how you as a student can gain experience and increase your proficiency in these areas, and eventually contribute to the industry what went through employment, and having this perspective that I think will really help to prepare our businesses for the future. And I think from the business perspective in particular, it's not about making rapid changes immediately. I know how difficult a time it is right now for tourism businesses across the region, but I think it's about building these three key points I want to talk about. People and communities is the first one, into your long-term business plan, and trying to come up with small incremental improvements and things that you can do each year that will help to advance that. One spotlight along people and communities I wanted to talk about a little bit more is some really exciting infrastructure programs that have recently been announced. First of all, the Tourism Vancouver Island Catalyst Fund, $200,000 that's directly supporting the implementation of our Vancouver Island destination development strategy. We're making investments in Indigenous communities and Indigenous businesses. We are making investments in trail systems and much more. We have also partnered and been working closely with the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture on the Targeted Regional Tourism Development Fund. It's $2.3 million that Tourism Vancouver Island will be allocating in the upcoming months to a variety of really, I think, important initiatives. We're going to be focusing on trying to support our ocean-friendly initiatives and reduce the impact that visitors, residents, and businesses around the region have on our marine spaces. We'll be making investments in accessibility for trail systems so that more visitors are able to get out and experience parts of the island that they typically would not be able to venture to. And one other example of many that I'll share is a new initiative that seems to be the first of its kind, certainly in BC and potentially North America, where we are making strategic, really targeted investments in trail systems and experiences around ancient forests and old growth trees, trying to create a network of really remarkable ancient forest experiences across the Vancouver Island region that safely welcome visitors, share information, and reduce the impact that visitors have on those sensitive spaces. So some really exciting projects and investments being made through the $2.3 million fund there. And finally, many of you have probably seen some really significant announcements around the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program. They're all a mouthful, that one in particular. And we've seen many tens of millions of dollars be contributed to the Vancouver Island region through this. We're seeing, in the Comox Valley area, significant improvements being made into marine infrastructure that will help us to welcome and support marine visitors. We're seeing massive investments in Indigenous communities to support the development of First Nations owned experiences. We're seeing trail investments and much more. So I would really encourage all of you to take a look at some of these really big infrastructure improvements. When I look through the list, it's just so exciting, and many of the projects that have been announced have been on the back burner since I started in tourism, and it's amazing to see them finally get the money they need to move forward. Second, economic prosperity. And ultimately the goal there is around building a better and more sustainable destination. We want to drive demand through our marketing efforts to ensure that BC and Vancouver Island remain a top travel destination and a top choice. We want to have digitally empowered operators who are able to reach their own target markets in a effective way. And I think that businesses are now discovering they've never had the ability like this before to directly target their consumers in a really focused and compelling way. And we want to support that. And but finally, I want to mention once again collaboration among our community DMOs. I know that often our communities view each other as competition, but we know that very few visitors to the island come here to do just one thing in just one place. And it's about working together as tourism professionals to try to build up our region as a whole. And we've been making significant investments of time and energy into that with our Vancouver Island Destination Leadership Council, which is comprised of all of our regional community destination marketing and management organizations. And the spotlight I wanted to provide on this is once again on the Tourism Resiliency Program. We're able to provide, create customized support plans for businesses. We have access to expert advice, whether it's legal, HR, business planning, marketing, or more. And we also have a new digital services program that will help you to take better control over your website, over your social media channels, and also over your Google My Business listings. So there's a huge amount of support available. And the reason that I include this in that longer term focus is I think we've really found a compelling new model for supporting businesses. We, from an industry development perspective, have long had a tendency to give intermittent webinars or intermittent workshops with little long-term support. The resiliency program has demonstrated the value of pairing businesses with a program advisor, somebody who can support them and understands their needs over the long term. So it's not just one presentation, it's long-term support for whatever you need, whether it's adapting to trying to attract new visitors just for this summer, or whether it's looking at trying to come up with concepts for more sustainable operations in the long term. I think the Tourism Resiliency Program will be here for the long term and available to support you. And third, respecting nature and the environment. And at the end of the day, it's all about sustaining supernatural BC. It's our province's tagline. It's, through our research, we can see that our, incredible natural environment is the reason that people come here. And sustaining that is so key. And we, ultimately need to ensure that we're able to support the viability of our experiences that rely on healthy natural systems. And we're doing quite a lot of work on this side of it. We'll be making a really exciting announcement on April 22nd about a new initiative that Tourism Vancouver Island and our regional partners will be embarking on in the coming months around sustainability. And we have also been doing quite a bit of work on this ocean-friendly concept. We believe as a team that Vancouver Island is different because we are surrounded by water. It sounds obvious, but I think we often miss it. And the ocean is a key part of just about everybody's experience when they come to the Vancouver Island region. We are at the beginning point of what we hope will be a longer term journey of celebrating the ocean and the connection that the tourism industry has to the ocean, and coming up with really tangible and practical ways that we as communities and businesses and nonprofits can reduce the impact that we have on the ocean and celebrate it ultimately. And the starting point for this on our ocean friendly work is a video that our marketing team put together that celebrates the connection that our small businesses have to the ocean. And while this is going on, our team members are also engaging the tourism industry and communities and Indigenous communities in particular, and trying to understand what the future of our ocean-friendly program will look like. And we have ambitions to grow this program to be on an international scale where we can work with other island destinations and destinations that rely on the ocean to celebrate and preserve it. And with that in mind, just want to wrap up this slide deck with a really short video that highlights some of this work. I encourage all of you to take a look on YouTube. And ultimately what you'll see in the video is it celebrates tourism businesses that rely on the ocean, whether they're restaurants and food producers, whale watching businesses, the Euclid Aquarium, etc., and speaks to the commitment that we feel our island-wide industry has around oceans. And we see this as a really exciting starting point for more to come. So with all that said, I'm going to leave it there for the presentation and leave hopefully lots of time for Q&A. I know that I wasn't able to be super specific about some of these initiatives. I really encourage you all to stay tuned, especially for our April 22nd announcement, which the team and I are really excited to share with all of you next month. So that said, would love to open it up for questions and discussion.
Thank you so much, Callum. Just going to have you got the Q&A window open there yourself, Callum, to start going through it, or do you want me to read some things out?
Let's see. I've got it up and running.
Okay. The first one is asking about co-op and getting co-op jobs in hospitality sector based on suggestions. Some of that answer might be best answered by the respective teams of experiential education and student employment service facilitators at North Island College and VIU. However, in the big picture question of co-ops this summer and student employment, Callum, do you have any reflections on that might be relevant?
Yeah, I think that just what I would share to begin with is if my advice to students and people who are looking to kind of enter the tourism workforce, it's I think all about networking right now, and also trying to respect the challenges and needs that the tourism industry and specific businesses are going through right now. But I think reaching out to businesses, getting to know what they do, expanding your network is really invaluable. And I think the reality is that it's going to be a bit of a challenging time, especially for folks graduating this spring to enter the workforce. But we know that there are many tourism jobs available, and my advice ultimately is to cast a wide net and get your foot in the door with a tourism business that that offers an experience that you're excited about and offers you an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think that that's probably going to set you up best for the longer term.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I'm not sure that I understand it. It's from Tracy asking if this is all businesses or just tourism businesses. And I think that might have been specific to a point in your presentation. Is it fair to say that the data you were presenting early on, Callum, was tourism specific data?
Yeah, that's my guess as to what Tracy's wondering. And all of that research is focused specifically on self-identified tourism businesses. And the research was based on a random sample of businesses on a rotating basis. And similar to the resiliency program, that research initiative started with our team at Tourism Vancouver Island, and then we were able to share it and bring it to a provincial level with our regional partners.
Okay, thank you. One of our students from North Island College, give you a moment to read the question. The question for those who aren't seeing them, he's wondering, Liam is wondering how these changes will affect Vancouver Island tourism in the future. Will the industry on the island go back to the way it was before? How much will marketing to the domestic market carry forward? Is it projected as an outcome for the pandemic that domestic travel numbers will continue to grow once international borders open up again? Crystal ball.
All right. Yeah, I wish I had all the answers. My feelings based on the research that we're doing is that ultimately the tourism will bounce back. We'll see, I think, similar numbers in terms of economic benefits to tourism, but I think that it's going to take place in a really staggered way. And as different source markets open up, so it's really difficult to predict. But I think that in terms of marketing to the domestic market, that's always been our focus at Tourism Vancouver Island, and we rely on our provincial and national partners to reach international markets. But I think that with with climate change, the reality is that we're starting to see, even prior to the pandemic, people being more aware of the impact that flights are having on airfare or air travel in particular on the health of our planet, and people are looking to reduce their impact, and we're seeing the travel or the airline industry try to respond to that. But I think for us in Canada, our focus needs to be on having a really strong domestic market, trying to really succeed in the US market. And then when it comes to those longer haul travelers, I think it's all about extending the length of their stay and trying to encourage them to come less regularly, but spend more money when they do come here and stay for a longer period of time.
Yeah, so that really speaks to the leadership role among the DMOs on the island, and having that collective effort to once someone's here, have them stay longer and experience the diversity of the Vancouver Island region and adjacent coast. Great, thank you. There's been a few questions around whether this recording of this session will be shared or the slide deck is shareable.
Sure, no problem.
Right on. And this one from Madison is wondering, it's Madison in my quick read is recognizing the emergency response benefit has been essential for those who lost partial or full employment in tourism and hospitality. The CERB has also received negative feedback from employers around those who've left their tourism work because they're earning more through the benefit. How do you think that positions things for employees returning to work for their normal wage? What does this say about the tourism sector and the DMO perspective, I think, on the wages available in our sector?
Yeah, it's a good question and a challenging question that I'm honestly a little nervous to answer because there's so much kind of packaged into it. I think that we have been hearing the challenges that CERB brought for some businesses, particularly businesses that have lower wage workers. And I don't want to get too deeply into it. I know that there are certainly examples where staff were choosing to stay on CERB and didn't want to return to work. And I don't know the individual situation of those employees. And at the end of the day, I think that we as an industry need to respect the challenging decisions that employees had to make about their health and the health of their families during I think what we can probably say is the scariest time. Think back to this time last year, how terrifying it really was. So I don't want to second guess or draw any conclusions around that, but I think that what we've been advocating for as Tourism Vancouver Island is more support for our small and medium-sized businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic by no fault of their own. By we're seeing very well-intended government policy and public health measures designed to protect people, but we need to have supports and services available to protect our businesses, to ensure that there's going to be meaningful opportunities for people to return to work, for economic growth and vibrancy in our communities. So at the end of the day, that's what we really need to focus on, and that's what we've been advocating for as an association.
Okay. Thank you, Callum. Yes, it's a tricky dynamic, and one where there's been no dress rehearsal on it, and really recognizing the range of reasons why people are making decisions, and recognizing, I think, the hard work that DMOs and businesses are doing to keep the doors open and keep meaningful work, and maybe in that a bit of a reckoning or reassessment in some cases around what wages can be afforded, or how things also maybe need to be priced so that it's able to boost the wage, or other benefits, other ways that sense of compensation and feeling valued is measured. And I know that's going to vary quite a bit across businesses. Question from Ali, wondering if you could go a bit more into what the digital services look like within the resiliency program.
Yeah, so this admittedly is not my area of expertise, but I would encourage you to go to tourismresiliency.ca. That's our kind of central website for the tourism resiliency program. And you can learn about all the specifics there. I think ultimately what we want to focus on when it comes to digital services, ensuring that your Google My Business listing is up to date and relevant and actually managed. ensuring that you're actively managing TripAdvisor and other platforms that are so important. Being active on your social media channels, even if your business is one of those that is closed right now. It's so important to stay top of mind, provide a virtual glimpse into what your experience is all about. And last but not least, helping our businesses to be able to make their own informed, data-driven marketing decisions. You can now, you no longer have to dump tens of thousands of dollars or thousands of dollars into print materials and just throw them out there. You can take a much smaller budget and you can be incredibly targeted with who is seeing what messaging, when, and why. So it's all about preparing, individual businesses to, draw their own markets and represent themselves in that digital world as best they can.
Thank you, Callum. We only have a couple more minutes for Q&A before we transition. However, a couple more questions. One from Luis asking, the impact of the pandemic is seen across the whole industry, but they'd love to hear your thoughts on what businesses or sectors you see recovering faster. Any guesses as to why?
Yeah, well, I think that what we've been seeing over the past year is that from a destination perspective, communities that are smaller, more resort style, that have bigger spaces with less faces, like we've been hearing, are the ones that were faring better during these over the course of the last year. So Tofino, Ucluelet, Partial Qualicum Beach, and other areas have been kind of hanging in there in part because they have that range of outdoor experiences. The ones that I think the sectors that will be the slowest to recover will naturally be those businesses that rely on international travelers. We know that if we're talking about bear watching, for example, off the North Island, seeing a grizzly bear going out with Hamalco or another provider is a life-changing experience. And for some reason, international travelers are much more willing to pay for those higher end experiences than the domestic travelers are. As a result, it's going to be slower for those businesses that rely on international travelers as they try to recover from this. And supporting those businesses in particular is one area where we've really wanted to be particularly focused.
Okay. Thank you. And I know that a number of some of our biggest opportunities moving forward are in the Indigenous partnerships and Indigenous businesses and the market interest in that. And those are also some of the small businesses and smaller businesses that have been hit hardest and will be hit the longest, while some of these remote communities and understandably vulnerable contexts are on hold for longer, waiting until it feels right. Yeah. And meanwhile, a lot of promise ahead. Question from Corey. Corey's interested to know how businesses are pivoting their services during the pandemic. Are there more key takeaways or success stories that could be shared, or resources? I believe that there's the Storm Riders series that TVI has worked on.
Yeah, that's a really great example. Would encourage you all to take a look at that. It's on our consumer tourism Vancouver Island site, vancouverisland.travel. And essentially what we're doing is putting a spotlight on individual businesses and business owners who've been finding creative ways to adapt and survive and sometimes even thrive during these really challenging times. When more broadly speaking, when I look at what businesses in our tourism resiliency program and also businesses, like multinational corporations, the focus during this time has been similar. It's about staying top of mind to consumers so that when travel returns, you're well positioned. We know that there's pent up demand for travel, but we also know that it will be incredibly competitive for across the industry. Like right now, I yesterday for some reason received cruise pamphlets in the mail. No idea where that's coming from, but it's going to be a battle to fight for market share when international travel opens up. So it's about being prepared there. Also have seen, generally speaking, a real shift for businesses trying to digitize everything that they do. And that's whether it's a small mom and pop shop or a huge corporation like Marriott. There've been a real focus during this downtime on optimizing systems and also training staff.
Thank you. Before we transition, I want to take this question from Ronald St. Pierre, and then for the other questions that have appeared. And thank you so much, everyone, for these questions and this interaction. It always feels like there's never enough time. Maybe if you don't transition to part two right away, you can stay with Callum and we can field a couple more questions. A question from Chef Ronald St. Pierre from Locals Restaurant here in the Comox Valley where I am. He's asking, once the recovery, we've moved through recovery, tourism reopens, how are we going to overcome the shortage of qualified workers that we had pre-pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one thing I just want to add is that when I moved back to Vancouver Island about 5 or 6 years ago, took the ferry over to the island, I was moving to Cumberland. First place I ate was Locals with my dad. So it's got a pretty fond spot for me as the first place I ate after returning home to the island. And I know that the issue of a shortage of qualified workers is really significant across all subsectors of the tourism industry. And I think at the end of the day, a challenge that we face is around the often lower wages in the tourism industry and being able to secure, particularly the less skilled positions. But I also know that more skilled positions are very much in demand. So for us as an organization, we've been partnering with Indigenous Tourism BC, Go2HR, Spinal Cord Injury BC, and now the Immigrant Services Society of BC. And we think that through partnerships with each of those organizations, we're going to be able to make a bit of a difference. And I think that for individual business owners, it's about trying to think differently for who you hire and how you search for folks. Recent immigrants and newcomers to the Vancouver Island region can offer, a really great opportunity to hire, to hire folks. Hiring older people and people with disabilities is another big opportunity. And then I think, generally speaking, putting time into working with, local educational institutions, co-ops, et cetera, is a really great way to be top of mind with soon-to-be grads. But there's really no silver bullet for this, and it's going to take a really concerted effort for the whole industry to fix this over the long term, paired with ultimately making our industry more competitive from a wage perspective.
Okay, thank you, Callum. We're going to transition to part two now. As we do that, I really want to thank you for your presentation, your time. Thank everybody for the questions and being here for part one. I really appreciate the work that Callum, you and your colleagues at Tourism Vancouver Island and with CEO Anthony Everett's leadership, everything that you're doing to make it so that we really are, I think, as a business owner, tourism educator, local resident, less alone and less conflicted with some of these tourism questions because we're working together. And I appreciate that.